One. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, 2021 Action Planning for Post-Traumatic Growth, Fostering Post-Traumatic Growth in Individuals and Teams. My name is Carrie Zenz with Allen Interactions. Our mission is to enhance the human mind and spirit through meaningful, memorable, and motivational learning and performance experiences. We're best known for our work in the e-learning instructional design space based off of the work from Dr. Michael Allen, our founder and CEO, and many others here at Allen Interactions. But we also provide a variety of services from custom learning to strategic consulting, digital engineering, government services, staff augmentation, and we can also you can also get a lot of courses and education through our Allen Academy. So please check those out as you have time. While we're on the webinar today, please note to change your settings from all panelists to all panelists and attendees on your chat feature. We will be using the chat box a lot today, just posing questions and having you share your insights and thoughts. We will not be doing any polls today, so just using the chat feature. And we will also be sharing out the recording to everyone as well. So everyone will get the recording. Today, we are thrilled to have Dr. Christina Koidakis-Bars here with us to focus on organizational resilience building, enabling individuals and teams to build a successful year, and action planning for post-traumatic growth. We really want this hour to be lively and interactive. So like I said, again, we'll be using the chat feature and getting your ideas and feedback from you. Dr. Bars is an experienced HR, learning and organizational change management expert. She's a coach, professor, teacher, and her sweet spot is in building systems that support, engage, and inspire cultures with sustainable and measurable results. So here up on the screen is just all of the work that we have done in this series, this post-traumatic growth series. We have a total of 3 webinars, 2 that we've already done, and then the one today is the final one. And then we also have some blogs as well. So I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Christina Bars, and she's going to share so many wonderful things with you today. So take it away, Christina.
Hey, thank you so much, Carrie. So those 2 first blogs or webinars that we actually did, I'm just going to go one slide back. The first one was on innovation and building resilience and fostering post-traumatic growth in individuals and teams. And during that highly interactive workshop, we gathered information and developed the second webinar, which was Resiliency, a Lifelong Journey. So the first webinar was focused on recognizing workplace trauma, the signs, the symptoms, and at a micro and a macro level. And we'll actually be revisiting this throughout this workshop today. The second workshop talked about the first day of school to the last day of work, how we build resiliency and different ways to build resiliency in an educational format and training. All of this information is available for download at Allen Interactions website. So thank you so much for joining us for the 2021 Action Planning for Post-Traumatic Growth. So what is post-traumatic growth? Well, first, what is resiliency? Resiliency is when you have the ability to go through trauma and bounce back, go back to the previous mindset that you had before the trauma in a healthy mindset. When you have a trauma or a stress that pushes beyond those wells of resiliency that we have, you risk burnout. Also, by utilizing different tools and techniques, you can push through the trauma and arrive at a new mindset, a growth mindset with a new perspective, new skills, and even a new call to action for your life. So that's the reason why we're looking at post-traumatic growth. Just the same as individuals may go through resiliency or post-traumatic growth, organizations at a macro level do the same. So today's webinar, we have 5 goals. First is design thinking, how it supports a growth mindset, how to strengthen organizational resiliency building, how to enable individuals and teams to plan a successful 2021, understanding and identifying organizational trauma, and action planning for post-traumatic growth. Now, our action planning is similar to any action planning that you're going to do. It's the same as project management, work breakdown structures, etc. It's taking it and looking at it through the lens of post-traumatic growth and trauma-informed leadership, a more human-centric leadership style. So to start, let's level set. During this global pandemic, what have been your organization's greatest challenges to executing action plans? So Claire is going to be following the chat box. So please place your answers there. We'll give you a couple minutes to respond.
All right, we have some responses coming in. So, reduced resources, both personal and financial. A big challenge is putting into place all of the appropriate safety procedures, getting people to feel safe at work.
Ah, yes.
Let's see, team collaboration virtually and managing team morale while remote. Caring for the well being of our employees, helping them feel safe. Again, big focus. Let's see, supporting employees who are homeschooling or providing care for others. Too many Zoom meetings, not enough time to work.
I hear a theme, and it's psychological safety. It's creating that in space that people can feel safe to talk and be creative and problem solve. And the Zoom meetings, quite often what's happening with Zoom is actually what happens in the workplace, where we have meeting after meeting after meeting. The problem is when we're co-located, we're able to just walk down the hallway and pop in someone's office and have a conversation and resolve issues at the ready. However, now most of our interactions with our teammates are through organized as opposed to organic interactions. So thank you so much, Claire, for sharing those. So your incredible comeback journey, I'm going to apply a little bit of appreciative inquiry, a la David Cooper Ryder, and ask you all to just close your eyes for a moment and imagine a year from now. So a year in January 2022, what would be your incredible comeback story for your organization? What will it feel like for you, for your team members, for your organization, and for your community? What behaviors and mindsets are going to be practiced in your comeback? So I'm going to give you a couple minutes just to kind of let that marinate in the success. So you have that locked tight. Remember that. We're going to refer to that image and that vision throughout this webinar. So earlier we talked about the very first webinar that we did. We talked about symptoms of organizational trauma and how to identify them. So there's four categories of organizational trauma that appear: cognitive, emotional, physical, and behavioral. I'm just going to go through at a very high level, just for reference for today, what those four buckets are. Now, cognitive and emotional are very close together because they're both, have to do with the mind and how the mind processes. Cognitive is more rational thinking, the logic, while emotional is more about the feelings, the self-confidence, sense of worth. So to start, for cognitive symptoms, at an individual level, you might see behavior patterns of lack of accountability, blaming others, catastrophic thinking, poor attention spans. And the organizational symptoms, so we're talking micro is individual, macro is at organizational, would be missed deadlines, decrease in creativity. Remember earlier, Claire referred to a lot of psychological safety issues. So that may be something that is holding people back from feeling safe to risk and share and create. Problem solving and innovation has a lack too. Now, for physical symptoms, that's often those stress-related illnesses for individuals, headaches, backaches, chest pain, stomach, gastric distress, lethargy, a change in appetite, et cetera. Those are like the stress-related illnesses. And organizationally, what you're going to see is a lack of meeting production levels, a loss of time, frequency of absenteeism and tardiness. And then let's bring it all together. So we've done emotional, cognitive, physical. Let's go to the behavioral. And on behavioral, the individual symptoms are you're going to see withdrawal, lack of engagement, avoidance, emotional outbursts, a lack of trust that you'll see. And we'll talk a little bit later about how we engender trust as a trust bridge between leaders in the front line. And organizational symptoms, so, we talked about the micro, going to the macro. Organizational will be erratic behavior, major change in team dynamics. Teams that usually were able to get things done, be very highly effective, are starting to swirl. It's hard to come to consensus. People are not working together and collaborating. Those would be some of the organizational issues or symptoms. So going through all of those, let's just kind of level set for a moment and ask you all in the chat box, this question: what symptoms of organizational trauma are you witnessing currently?
All right, we've got some starting to come in. So, lost vision, lack of effective leadership, and no champion to lead change.
Hmm. That lack vision is probably about lacking the vision of the organization. We talk a little bit later on that regarding the shadows and strengths of organizations and how what makes an organization strong can also make the organization weak. So great feedback.
Okay, so some change in team dynamics, which you mentioned, communication challenges, bullying, stress, and anxiety. We have disengagement, less connection, more negative attitudes, anxiety again, disconnection due to limited contact with the team, additional responsibilities causing unhappy employees, and a lot more responses dealing with, frustration, anxiety, and lack of relationships.
It's amazing that how much relationships really play into work. You don't realize it until you're all segregated and you're not able to meet and see each other on a daily basis, that that sense of community is lost. We were just talking about that here at Allen Interactions about the loss of our, we're mourning the loss of our water cooler. Those conversations where we all get together and able to talk. And it gives you an anxiety because sometimes we experience anxiety at work on a daily basis before the pandemic, but getting the ability to get up, go make a cup of coffee and walk and just talk with somebody and just, actually dispel that anxiety and worry, even just physically moving makes us feel better. So thank you very much, Claire, for that. So again, what we're talking about, and you've heard all of those symptoms. What's common about those? What's common is that they're human, and human-centered leadership and human-centered approach in design are the ways that we can build our organizations to be resilient and to be able to power to post-traumatic growth. So on the screen, you see design thinking as an example. And design thinking is a human-centric approach to problem solving and innovation. It's very similar to emotional intelligence, where we have those four categories of self-awareness, self-management, relationship building, and social awareness. So in empathize, that first box that you see, that's being able to connect to others, to understand and be self-aware, but then also help others connect to those affected by the problem and how they can resolve the problem. So you're not just taking care of the process, you're taking care of the people. The define piece is that part of making sure everybody has the same definition of the problem. And then you go into this iterative process of ideating, creating, prototyping, trying things out, testing, and then going back to ideate. I remember when one of the projects I worked on, we improved the process flow for patients going through the heart and vascular cardiothoracic surgery area. And we created this really fantastic process that reduced the length of stay from 7.2 days to less than 5, which was phenomenal for a patient. You don't want them any longer in the hospital than necessary to risk hospital-acquired infections. But what happened was we were able to change the process, but what we failed to do is to listen to the people and understand that some of the changes that we were asking, though made logical sense, remember that rational part of the brain, the cognitive part of the brain, those made sense, but the emotional part of the brain was not being addressed. So when we're thinking of human-centered approach, we're looking at a holistic approach of dealing with our people and our problems. So we're addressing all 4 quadrants, the emotional, behavioral, cognitive, and physical parts of the people. So operationally, post-traumatic growth, and I talked about what resiliency is and what post-traumatic growth is. And those are all the great ideas and definitions, but how does it help your organization be better? How does understanding what that is and being human-centric make your organization prepared to be a very successful 2021 so that we achieve that goal that we were talking about for 2022 in January? So one of the things is, as leaders, you've always heard this phrase, put your oxygen mask on yourself before you put it on anybody else. As we go through this flight of 2021, what we want to make sure is that we as leaders are resilient, that we are self-aware of what our resiliency is and our capabilities are, so that we can be strong enough and model the desired behaviors for our immediate teams and those teams that report to those teams. So before we move further, we're just going to ask another question. And remember, all of the questions that we are asking, that we've asked through our 3 webinars that we've offered, and even feedback on our blogs, are being integrated into a workbook that will be sending all the people that have attended to these webinars will receive a workbook that you can be able to apply and use the tools and the tips and the tricks, plus the shared and collective knowledge of everybody that's been online for these webinars. So the question that will be answered in the box, what advice do you have for inspiring others to power through, to be able to have that resilience and to go through that when they're feeling like they're burnt out and they're overwhelmed? How do you rise them up? So again, I'm going to turn it over to Claire, and when she sees enough, she's going to start sharing as it populates the chat box.
Well, let me tell you, I already have quite a few responses relating to self-care, and I think that's super important. So self-care, encouraging self-care, reading a good book, taking a nap, breathing. We also have responses coming in, practice reflection and gratitude in meetings. This one's great. It's okay not to be perfect. Katie has a good response. She says, what's for lunch? Ask your employees every day before lunch how they will nourish themselves. Share recipes around the virtual water cooler.
Love that.
It goes along with creating opportunities to connect, reaching out to others in and outside the company to voice your issues, concerns. Oh, I really like this one. Randy says it's not about powering through so much as being kind to yourself and accepting that it is okay to not be okay.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. And I accept that correction. That's fantastic. And that's why I love these. I love the opportunity to hear from everyone, because hashtag together we're better. The more information that we get and the more feedback, it makes for a very robust book that we will produce. We've done books like that before for remote working and also for change management. So make sure that when you check Allen Interactions website for those also free resources that we have. So we told you you should be more aware of what you should be doing or feeling or how you could be feeling. This is a way for you to do it. This assessment is based on the Gallup 12, a little bit of Boyatzis, and mixed in with some Henderson. And those citations will be in the workbook. So this is a very simple assessment. I'm going to let Claire explain how to complete it as it populates up into your chat box.
Absolutely. So I've just put a link in the chat and you're going to go ahead and click on that. And this survey will pop up on the web page. You're going to pay attention to how many yeses, maybes, and nos you answer to each question, and then Christina will go ahead and explain what each of those means. There's also downloadable PDFs. You can take it and use it with your team. And then we will be sharing this page in the follow-up as well, so you can access it later. So go ahead, click on that link, and then let me know in chat if you're able to access it. We'll give you a little bit of time to answer.
Great, and we're giving you the opportunity to answer. And while you're doing that, I'm going to go and talk a little bit more about what positivity is and responding positively. So language is an incredibly powerful way to create a psychologically safe environment for those around you. Remember earlier when we were asking about some of the challenges, psychological safety came up as a theme. And the foundation for psychological safety is trust. When people feel that they can trust those around them, their authority figures, they feel that they can risk, they're safe. And some of the parts of trust are stability, accountability, and mutual respect. Now, right now, it's very difficult as a leader to be leading in an unstable world or an unstable world. And how do you create stability in an environment like that? Well, it's holding yourself accountable and being authentic. Say what you're going to do and then do what you say, and then follow up to let people know you've said something. Accountability is also, I loved earlier when we were asked, how are you helping people with strengthen during times of distress or trauma? And one of the things that was shared was asking people what they're having for lunch. Are they nourishing themselves? You're holding them accountable for their self-worth and their self-care. That's a demonstrative ability to show that you value them and you value their wellness. And mutual respect, having that respect to be transparent with those around you through active communication plans that are in multiple levels. We do have a blog about the 4 W's of informed leadership communication during trauma. And that will help you with, again, establishing that trust bridge and mutual respect. So the difference is when you're talking about types of communication, there's 2 different types of communication. We're talking about positive psychology. There's reactive and there's proactive. So reactive language disenfranchises or pushes people back. So an idea that's to help you identify when you're doing or engaging in reactive language is understanding what some of those word choices are. Some of them may be need to, ought to, have to. Notice how those are closed word phrases. So you have to do this, you ought to do this, you need to do this. Those are word choices that basically are establishing a no choice for that individual. That person doesn't have a choice but to do what you're asking them to do, or even on our own self-talk. Now the word but, when you say something, let's say for example, giving feedback, you may say, that's a great way to build resilience, asking about lunching and what they're having for nourishment. But does that undermine yourself as a leader by being a friend? Oh my gosh. So the word but right there, just like as if you're writing it on a whiteboard, when you say but, you take an eraser and you erase all the words, all that great stuff before the word but, and then and what the person hears is just the negative part. I mean, well-meaning, however, the problem is eventually you continue doing that type of pattern and people are always waiting for that second shoe to drop. Whenever you give something that's a positive feedback or a positive accolade, people turn around and are waiting for the but. Like, okay, she's telling me something great, and what's bad? So the word but disenfranchises and pushes people away. And try and should. Those are words. Remember how we talked about trust is built on stability, accountability, and mutual respect? When you say, I'm going to try to do that, or I should do that, those are really kind of half-hearted commitments words. And what we want people to do is to say, I will commit to something. So let's flip and look at proactive language. So proactive language empowers. And what is empowerment? It means that the person feels like they're in control. They have a voice. They have the ability to make a choice. So word choices like love to, like to, choose to, commit to. For example, when you're working with a team, instead of saying you guys need to do this, asking them, what will you commit to doing? You'll be surprised when you say the word, what you're committing to doing, that people perk up and they provide much more that they're going to do than when you say, what do you feel like you need to do and get this done? Now, desire to or will and. So when you're giving feedback and providing advice or guidance, using the word and helps to bridge that concept and continues to honor that positive piece. So we're not erasing it, we're honoring it and clicking it to the desired new behavior. And then the words will, explore, and could. All three of those are words of accountability and commitment. And when you utilize those types of words, again, people feel empowered and they feel like they can move forward. Claire, how are we looking at people answering the survey?
We have a lot of yeses in the chat, so it looks like it's working fine. It looks like almost everyone is done with the survey.
Fantastic. Well, then I feel a little safe moving forward into kind of unpacking this. And again, like I said, all of this information will be in the workbook and also when you download this webinar. So let's say you have a majority of yeses in your columns. You've added everything up, and at the bottom, you have yes. So, hey, you know what? Celebrate those yeses. You're rocking your self-talk. You've got a great, strong cheerleader inside you. And, appreciate this as a strength of yours, but continue on your self-care. Because remember, even the strongest of selves may be affected by burnout and trauma. And that's totally understandable. So I'd identify that. Now, how do you maintain that, right? So you've got these yeses. I'm telling you, keep the strongest of selves. Well, remember, we talked about positive communication and word choices are important. We're going to use the concept of maintaining resilience self-talk. So affirmations would be, I am focused on my goals and feel passionate about my life and work. I'm courageous, I am confident, I am worthy. You could take this type of self-reliance, self-talk, and put it on a post-it, stick it on the bathroom mirror, stick it next to your laptop screen. And these words actually will help you maintain that sense of self and worth. Now, let's say you had a majority in the no column. You might have your inner self-critic is driving your mindset, plus it's kind of has its own route. And I think it's time to evict them. But the good thing is that you're self-aware and you're seeking to better understand yourself. And when you do that, trying to find, more about yourself and understand each one of these questions has a story behind it. And each one of them have a no tells you a story. So, we're going to be visited by Fred the cat, which is a demonstration of resiliency and its own parts. So here, Fred. Here's Fred the cat. Fred, by her face, you can tell, has a majority of no in her column. There you go, babe. So what does it mean to unpack those no's? Well, understanding those stories behind each thing doesn't mean that necessarily a lot of no's is a bad thing. It just means that where you are right now, like any assessment you ever do, the MBTI, the Myers-Briggs, the DISC, any type of assessment is a snapshot of time. So just like this. So if you have a lot of no's, just give yourself grace and look at it and understand why you're saying no, or at some of them, why you said yes, to better understand yourself and to build your resiliency. Now, self-talk, to help build that self-talk, that self-resiliency, are affirmations such as, today is a good day. I'm worthy, strong, and positive. One of my favorites is, I woke up on the right side of the daisies. Excellent way to look at the day. I see joy, happiness, and love in all things. And it might be a stretch working in the workplace. However, taking a concept or an idea and writing even your own mantra that after you've looked at your no's, what are the things that you desire in your heart of hearts to build your resiliency that make you feel strong? Now, let's say you have a majority in the maybe column. Now, a majority in the maybe column is okay because life is not always clear. I mean, we really don't know what's right from wrong, yes and no. There's so many different colors along the spectrum that the idea is that celebrate the fact that you see multiple sides of a situation. You're an incredibly empathetic soul. And with your inquisitive mind and curious nature, you can actually unpack why those maybes are. Maybe your role in this world is to be more of a conciliatory arbitrator, the person that brings the majority of yeses and the majority of nos together to help them see and move forward. You might be interested in doing this assessment with your team and actually be surprised to have the majority of yeses, majority of nos, majority of maybes, and be able to talk a little bit more to have a better understanding of each other. So a repairing resiliency self-talk will be, I know, I accept, and I am true to myself. Through any of these types of self-talk or any of the stuff when it comes to growth or resiliency building and counteracting burnout, because burnout is when we lose our sense of self and our place in the world, is to honor ourselves and be true to our authentic person, know who we are and what we bring to the table and celebrate that. Another affirmation is, I'm filled with love, gratitude, and kindness for another day on this earth. Again, that whole being on the right side of the daisies. So we talked about ourselves, that micro level, that individual. And when we were talking about identifying organizational trauma, we discussed it at a macro and a micro level. So let's talk about the organizational landscape. So this particular worksheet I really like for getting a snapshot of your organization and where it's at this particular moment. It's a really great worksheet that you can utilize with your team and bring them together. If you have some high potentials and you want to use it as a experiential learning experience for them to be able to practice looking at a 10,000 to 30,000 foot view of an organization. This is a great strategy worksheet. This is a fantastic way for you to either at the team level or the department level or the organizational level, take inventory of where your organization is. Now there's two axes. Axis that's vertical is on results and relationships, while the axis, the horizontal one, is on individual and teams. Now, relationships and results are very important, and it's important to be able to balance the two. It's kind of like a motorboat. When a boat is going through the water, it has wakes, and the wakes, one wake of that white frothy water is your results. The other wake is your relationships. Now, if you only focus on results, what's your boat going to do? Is it going to continue going straight? No, it's going to keep going in circle and leave bodies in the water. The other way is that if you take the results out and you just have relationships, again, you're going to continue circling in the water, but never getting anywhere with your organization and making progress. So it's really important to understand your results and your relationships. So I'm going to go through each one of these blocks. We'll talk about the head and strategic alignment, really that cognitive part that we were talking about earlier. And then the heart, which is the emotional piece, that vision and values alignment to the organization and how your employees and yourself feel connected. So let's look at the relationship with self. And this is where personal alignment for your employees and the strategic alignment and execution meets. And there's some prompting questions. I'm going to share a couple of those prompting questions. What's really important is being authentic when you're talking about this and understanding how authentic you are. Are you feeling like you have imposter syndrome? Are you truly delivering what helps the organization in your heart of hearts get to where it needs to be? So some of these prompting questions you can ask of yourself as a leader, or like reflectively looking at your team, your division, or your organization. How does our organization message align to our employees' core values? Are you, because now, most likely during the past year, a lot of values have changed and shifted. A lot of people are seeing things differently. So is your organization still aligned to those? Do you feel like you have the pulse? Um, what are the attitudes observed towards the organizational mission? Do people still feel aligned to it? Do they feel still connected to it? Are they bought in? And are the core assumptions about this organizational mission? What are those core assumptions? From a healthcare system to a manufacturing system to an IT organization, that mission, vision, and value is incredibly important. And how do people see themselves in the bigger whole? So behaviors. So that's when we're connecting the heart, the vision, and the values to results. So teams are groups with shared vision. That's what makes a difference between a group and a team. So prompting questions in this particular quadrant would be, what actions are we asking our employees to take? What requests are leaders making of their teams? And what offers are team members and employees making? Are people offering to work overtime? Are they offering to help cover for others? Are they offering to identify problems and solutions and do innovation? That would be an indicator of a healthy workspace that people feel psychologically safe. Or are people holding back and not making offers? See, these questions, though just 3 per quadrant, really do help you unpack what's going on in your organization. So social relationships. So this is the connection of the organization, the strategic alignment to the organizational alignment. So, the prompting questions would be, what stakeholders are involved beyond my department or organization? So really it's looking at the bigger whole. Where do we sit in the greater community? What do they value? What is our community's value? And how can we get them engaged, aligned, involved, and committed? So for example, in healthcare systems, if a healthcare system has to close a hospital down, and they know that all the data says that the hospital is no longer safe, the hospital is no longer serving the purpose that was required, and that the shift of the demographic would be better with a family health center or a medical health center that offers dialysis and healthy nutritional classes and even elderly care. Even though that is what the data tells you, how are you communicating that to the community? How are you communicating that to your stakeholders? How are you making sure that they're aligned to your mission, aligned to the vision, and actually see it that you're doing something as an organization for the betterment of the organization? And last quadrant would be the systems and structures. So this is the part where the organization, the structure of the organization, the technology of the organization, the policies and the procedures, all of those that roll up to the mission, vision, and values of the organization, are they in alignment? And are they robust enough to be able to get you to your next point? So those questions would be, how will employee actions impact those systems? So in times of crisis and trauma, let's say during a natural disaster, and employees need to know information, will the systems be able to support those access by those employees or the clients or the community? What structures are available to achieve a desired outcome, thinking outside the box? If it's not the ability to use the phone lines and the internet, are there other platforms that have the ability for you to be able to send out text messages, for you to be able to leverage what you're already paying for, but that have that? Some LMSs have that capability. It's thinking outside the box and understanding what do you have readily available to help you during these times of mass scale crisis. And then what structures or processes are required to support a desired outcome? Again, thinking about that desired January 2022, looking at relationship with self, behaviors, social relationships, and systems and structures. What all of those things that you've written now for today, what highlight will help you get to where you need for tomorrow? So navigating that storm, the 2020 was a huge challenge. It's even a challenge to say it. It was a huge challenge. And navigating the storm is understanding where your organization is, what resources are required, internally to your organization and externally to your organization. It's helping your organization at every level be able to be resilient and have a strong sense of wellness and emotional and psychological safety. Now, one of the things we didn't talk about, this is until now, is cumulative trauma. There's different types of trauma. There's post-secondary, post-traumatic stress syndrome, which is PTSD. There's secondary post-traumatic stress, that's when others see somebody going through a traumatic experience. And there's even vicarious trauma, when you are hearing others talk about a traumatic experience. You ever hear somebody talking about an accident or an operation or something, and you could literally feel what they're going through? That's vicarious trauma. There's generational trauma, when trauma is passed down from one generation to another generation to another generation, and it changes the way that people see things, feel things, perceive the world. That's intergenerational trauma. Cumulative trauma is when you have multiple traumas going on at the same time. So let's take a look back at 2020. What are the things that happened during 2020? There were multiple traumas going on. There was the global pandemic, but there was also political unrest. So let's just put a pause here, because each one of those traumatic experiences chips away at the self-worth and the feeling of safety for your employees and your organization. So in the chat, would you be kind enough to list the traumatic experiences your employees have experienced to date? And I'll wait. In fact, I'll take a sip of my ginger ale. Claire, let me know when you start seeing things populate.
Sounds good. I will do that. All right, so it looks like a lot of the things we're seeing, we've seen earlier in the chat responses. A lot of uncertainty, constantly changing direction from leadership. Again, dealing with and handling childcare and or schooling. Lack of external support, feeling disconnected, and being exhausted emotionally. This seemed to be some of the most popular responses here.
The emotional exhaustion is huge, because it just continues to, that's like that cumulative trauma, the political unrest, the racial tensions, the economic uncertainty, furloughs, quarantine, children working from home. I mean, each one of those is a trauma. And when you start layering them on, just think of them as, bricks on your shoulder, put one, put another, and slowly it just becomes overwhelming or overbearing. So the idea is, when we're looking at how do we lead people through trauma, the cumulative trauma is something that it's not just one thing, it's a highly dynamic experience. And I'm sorry, I'm not laughing at how it's a highly dynamic experience. My husband is removing the cat. Thank you. So the ideas are that you have multiple layers of trauma. And when you're dealing with how do you connect, how do you create communication plans, how do you plan for do action planning for 2021, is thinking about not only just the pandemic, but also all the other things that people are being traumatized by. And how do you create a risk mitigation moving forward to help them navigate? A lot of organizations, I know there's like one organization I'm familiar with, which knows about the food scarcity that's happening currently. So they created an employee food pantry. And it's, people are able to go in, they're able to donate to the food pantry, and they're able to anonymously, and they're able to partake from the food pantry anonymously. There's all these different ways that organizations are rising up and dealing with the multiple layers of trauma that people are experiencing. If we can take just one piece and give people peace with that, peace, it will help them to have resiliency to deal with other parts that are affected by in their job by the outside forces that are outside of their control. So strengths and shadows. Now, earlier you talked about, what's a strength of an organization, that mission. And I think we talked a little bit about that in some of the questions that answers that Claire shared. And one of the things I love is this book, Strength Finders. In Strength Finders, they talk about how you have a strength, you have those 34 different strengths in your organization, in yourself. And even with those strengths that you have, each strength has kind of a shadow, because if you overuse the strength, if it's out of control, it can actually be negative as opposed to positive. So for example, if you're great at building plans, and maintaining control of a situation, that's a strength. However, when it's out of control, when your control is out of control, you could look like you're not allowing people to grow, to develop, that you're micromanaging, that you're over engineering a situation. So in an organization, it's the same way. So for example, your mission statement. So when you're looking at planning for 2021, and you're trying to future-proof and create this environment of safety and being informed in how you communicate effectively with your employees and with those around you, look at what your organization mission, vision, and values are, especially what your mission is and your values. So for example, if passion is a huge strength for your organization, passion can help the organization move forward, it can propel you. However, passion uncontrolled, or the dark side of passion, is that people start to feel independent and walk away from that collective shared future state of your organization. It's similar to organization. What happens a lot to organizations that are nonprofits that help with emotional discourse or social problems, their mission is so focused at helping and healing and absorbing negativity and toxicity, that what happens is that they don't course correct or actually notice that cumulative trauma that's going on. Eventually those feelings of those values of empathy and compassion start to erode away at the ability to be financially successful. I remember I was consulting and working with a group of nurses, and they were help doing telemedicine and couldn't figure out they needed more nurses in their group. And their volume was substantial, but it wasn't showing that they were overworked. Yet when I watched them, they were, very busy and continuously answering phones and talking. When I found out the value of compassion for the organization, these nurses were practicing. And however, when they were practicing that compassion, they felt bad when a patient would call them multiple times when they were having problems, and they would only bill them once because they felt compassion. And you see where that strength of compassion can actually be a shadow, because they weren't billing for every time the patient called. They were not actually accounting for all the times that they were utilizing that information for that patient, and therefore quantifying, getting more help so they could help more people. So it's understanding and looking with a critical eye your value statements and your mission statement, and see, is there some place that could be could drive to a negative response or could be a risk. And what it means is that you don't abandon compassion or empathy or something. What you do is you figure out and work with the people around you, work with your marketing department, work with your colleagues about what your narrative is to help people stay on the positive side of the strengths of your organization. So arriving safely, we've had quite the flight, haven't we? We've talked about organizational trauma. We looked within ourselves, we looked at the organization itself, and we even looked at what the situation around the organization is going. So for action planning, at the very beginning, I talked about how action planning itself would stay the same. Good production project management is good project manager is good project management. Those practices will get you through everything. The idea, though, is that when you're doing a trauma-informed action plan, it's having this red, yellow, green at looking at what's the temperature of your organization, not just the metrics that are driving, but look at the why behind the metrics. Are you experiencing missed deadlines? Now, you remember those symptoms of organizational trauma we talked about earlier? Think about it. Are we having excessive tardiness and absenteeism? Are we starting to show the effects or the symptoms of organizational trauma? If the trauma is not overt, like for example, if you had an overt traumatic experience, I mean, in addition to the pandemic, et cetera, if there was a horrifically violent act that happened in your organization, again, you would look at what are some of the things that are happening in your organization and those behaviors so that you can get ahead. So it's, you know, it's actually helping you pulse. Where is your organization happening? What are some of the behavior clues or cues that are happening so that you can get ahead of it? So, you know, green, all systems go, everybody is working, there's healing, there's communication, people feel supported, they feel like they're participating in the wellness and the resiliency practices that are being provided by the organization. Yellow, there's some minor setbacks that are happening, some missed deadlines, or production levels are low, or quality is starting to spike, or there's some issues there. We take it, do a root cause analysis, find out what's happening. Even a root cause analysis, if you're into Lean or Six Sigma, or an after action review, if you're more organizational developmentally inclined, and figure out what's the setback, and then figure out how you can do a quick and easy way to get yourself back. However, address it when it's yellow. Now, red, that's the danger zone. That means that you should have, there's a complete stall, or there's issues that are happening in the organization that are preventing you from succeeding. And when you're starting to see some of that, incredible team discourse, people fighting, people breaking down and crying, issues where people are not resolving their problems themselves, schisms in teamwork or divisions, inability to cooperate. Everyone's gone back into a silo and kind of protected themselves. If you're starting to see these signs, then the idea is to, at that moment, as a leader, be strong, call a time out, and ask somebody from another department, division, or even someone like ourselves to come in and help you identify, create a objective opinion of what's going on, and then create a successful change and engagement process to be able to help your organization heal. If you have an EAP program in your organization, or spiritual care, or if you're a hospital or health system, bring them in, ask them to sit with the team or the division and do a cultural analysis and talk it through, level set, bring the temperature down, and then be able to move forward. So, key points. We discussed organizational trauma, post-traumatic growth, and how to operationalize those solutions. We explored what a growth mindset is, that asset-based thinking versus that deficit-based thinking, positive language versus reactive language, and design thinking, which is a human-centric or human-based leadership approach to resolution of problems, innovation. We shared experiences in strengthening our organization and resiliency building. Thank you very much for participating in that chat. And we introduced some job aids to help support resiliency building and post-traumatic growth. So as Carrie said earlier, Allen Interactions is known for meaningful, memorable, and motivational solutions that have measurable gains. And that's the part that we want to look at when we're thinking about post-traumatic growth and moving forward, rising above our cumulative trauma, honoring those who are going through it, meeting them where they are, and then helping them move forward. So these are some of our strategic services that Allen Interactions provides. We have learning transformation, digital transformation, product transformation, and process transformation. Those are part of our strategic services. We have people, process, and technology. So think about us when you have a challenge in learning, growing, and development. That workbook, you'll be receiving a link for the workbook as we collect all the data and we synthesize it into a tool that we hope that will help you throughout 2021. So thank you so much for participating and joining us. Any last words, Claire or Carrie?
We do have one question in the chat if you have a second.
Sure.
You did answer part of it, but Anisha asks, how do you structure the most affected industry, healthcare and healthcare workers, by mid of this year or start of the next year? How is their behavior going to change, or will they be more resilient?
So how do you structure them so they can be more resilient?
Yes,
I believe that's the question?
Asking, yes.
Okay, so one of the things I've noticed in working with multiple health systems recently is the health systems that are connected to their people and have policies and procedures in place. I think health care as an industry is highly segmented by the different types of health systems. So I can only answer by organizations themselves. Hopefully with new legislation that's federal as opposed to just statewide, that policies and procedures will be placed for licensure, expansion, that people will work within their scope and not beyond their scope, and that the proper ability for people to grow and develop in healthcare for fulfilling careers will help them so that we can mitigate the loss, that regrettable loss that's happening in turnover in healthcare. So the organizations, those structures that she's asking about, some of the successful structures I've seen have been centers of excellence for wellness. I've seen where they've had carts that go through the organization and actually break the cycle of work. So they stop to get like some ice cream or to talk about like a small huddle card and be reflective on things that they're doing. I've seen oasis rooms, and those are rooms that are like just almost like a closet. Some storage rooms I've seen changed into them where they have one of those massage chairs and a one of those oil diffusers that has lavender, and they're able to go in, listen to spa music and close and shut down for even just 5 minutes. I know many of my nurse friends, the only time they ever get time to themselves is when they go in the bathroom and close the stall. So could we create something that's safe for them? So that's one of the pieces. So putting into structure in an organization, champion for your organization to have a wellness committee or wellness and resilience committee if they don't have a chief wellness officer already. Champion for that and get a C-suite support to be able to support that. A great resource for any of this is IHI, the Institute of Healthcare Improvement's Joy at Work program. They have some fantastic ideas, concepts, and job aids for developing structure to bring joy into work and to remove the barriers. So I hope I answered that.
It looks like some people in the chat resonated with that answer, so thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Anything else, Claire?
Nope, I think that's it.
Fantastic.
Lots of thank yous, and they enjoyed the presentation. So
thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. And on the behalf of Allen Interactions, please visit us and learn more about our offerings and post-traumatic growth, strategic consulting, and most of all, our creative and custom content.
Thank you all for joining us.